Welcome back. There should have been spooky music coming into this episode. So hopefully I found some music that was spooky enough for everyone. So welcome to the pre-Halloween episode of the Breakpoint Show. So it's October 25th, 2003, and we are back. Actually, Martin's back. Khalid and I have been back the whole time. We just live in these rooms that you see us in. But Martin was in Belgium for
Netherlands.
Techorama.
Actually, Belgium is home. I was at Techorama in Netherlands and
Netherlands. Yeah,
Portugal.
that other country that has bad food and good beer. So
and funny accents everywhere.
And funny accents. So and then you were in Porto, Portugal, and that was a lot of fun. If you hear Martin sniffling or sneezing or if he goes mute, it's because everyone got sick at NDC Porto.
It's all the organizers' fault that it was raining the entire week.
You guys remember what I said in our last episode? You were like, Khalid, you got to go to conferences. And I said, you know what? People are icky and it's going to, and then Martin gets sick.
Yeah.
So
I hate to say it, Khalid, but you were right.
Or he cursed you. It's Halloween, so he might have cursed you. Yep. So, yeah. And then Khalid has spooky lights behind him, and he actually, in honor of Martin and I having short hair, Khalid thought he would get short hair, so he shaved his head. So
yeah, I thought to myself, what's better than two guys with shaved heads? I said three guys with shaved heads.
Yeah, exactly.
Do the math.
So for this Halloween special, we're gonna twist up and talk about a few things. So we're gonna talk about technologies we would murder, like Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers or Chucky. I like Chucky.
I like Chucky too.
And Chucky's Bride. So what technology we would resurrect or reanimate. If anyone remembers the old Reanimator movie from the 1980s, you might want to go out this Halloween and find that one and watch it. I don't know how well it's aged because I haven't watched it since probably the late 80s, but came out in the mid 80s or so, or early 80s. So, and then if we have time, we might talk about spooky stories from our careers. So I will, I always kick it off to someone. So I'm going to kick it off to, let's go with Martin before he has a sneeze attack, and talk about technologies we would kill, murder, like put into a grave. So take it away.
Can I start with the one that I would love to revive, or at least
sure we can talk about
kind
that
of alive?
Too. Yeah. We would what do you want to reanimate?
I would love to reanimate Knockout.js. I know that we are kind of related to .NET audience and so on, but I would love to reanimate Knockout.js, because when you're building APIs or any web application that needs just a sprinkle of interactivity in the browser, Knockout.js was actually really good to do that. Working with view models and everything, but without all of the overhead of requiring page routing or service workers or all of those things. Knockout.js was just straight to the point. Here's my DOM. I want to bind it to some data and go ahead with that. Do you agree?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have gotten so complex in web development today. I think some of our story, a large portion of our murder, reanimate involves trying to get back to a more simple life. I think we've gone down this road of complex solutions, and it just causes some issues.
Yeah, so I have thoughts about Knockout.js because I use Knockout.js a lot. I really liked you kind of have to look at Knockout.js in the context of the time it was created, right? Like JavaScript was still very fledgling. Um, like the APIs in JavaScript and kind of like the web context just weren't there. So you had to call like methods instead of access fields. It was kind of weird, but it worked at the time. So I agree with the spirit of Knockout.js. I don't know if I want the API of Knockout.js back. I don't think it works in today's modern development landscape. But I will say I agree with Martin of like a lot of SPA frameworks like a React, even Vue, which I love Vue, and Svelte. You can build it like isolated components, but you typically see the demos that are like pushing for full blown SPA takeovers of the front end. And I think that part kind of sucks today. Right. So,
Khalid, is this you saying that you would grab an axe and just run after React and just put it down?
yeah, it's I was reading the documentation the other day and they do say you can kind of spin up a React component isolated from a React application, but I would guess nobody actually does that. Like it's an option, but then you have to ship the entire React library to the front end. People sometimes substitute things like Preact in those cases, but yeah. Um But I agree with you. Like the thing I would want to revive to piggyback off of what you said, I was thinking about it this morning. Um, the idea of unobtrusiveness in terms of your style sheets and your JavaScript. Remember that was a big thing, like being unobtrusive. Like jQuery pushed this idea of like you have your HTML, you can do some progressive enhancements of like hijacking forms or hijacking elements, but ultimately the page kind of stands with itself. At some point we lost that. Things like Tailwind that have like just these like crazy amount of CSS utility classes, JavaScript that's like right on the page and like tied directly to components. Like it works, but it feels maybe in my old mushy brain, it just feels not the right way. So, so
Yeah.
just to piggyback, how do you folks remember the unobtrusiveness of web development? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
Well, I always thought it was, and this is just me looking back, I like something that's a little straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Like as an example, I hated dependency injection when it first came out uh, in .NET framework at via third party libraries and products and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because not because I didn't see the benefit in it. I got burned from like 2 or 3 projects that I had to inherit that used inject or any of the other dependency injection, and they were really complex to kind of understand. Like
Mm-hmm.
whoever wrote it understood it, but whoever was, unless there was some knowledge sharing, it was tough. And it's like, okay, this goes down the rabbit hole or gopher hole, where is it coming back out? And that was the problem. It was this magic bag that you could kind of grab from any place. And so I was really happy when .NET Core, when like the people at Microsoft said, let's just build it into the actual framework, and
Mhm.
not that it makes it that much easier, but there is a established pattern that you do where you pretty much know, oh, it just constructors, and at least traditionally most people use the .NET Core or .NET, the new .NET dependency injection via constructor, mostly. So there's other ways to grab from the DI container, but yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I wish if I had to murder something, it would be the overuse of front end development.
Mhm.
And I know I'm like a broken record on this, but I think we need a little bit of like pendulum swinging back to more server side.
Mhm.
'Cause if you take a look at it, we have all this resources in the cloud, and you're telling me that we have to push everything to the browser and do 95% of everything over there. And it's the same thing. Like if I could resurrect, you know, we were talking about this, and I have the most, everyone's gonna kill me and want to murder me and come after me with an axe. But I'll tell you the thing that I would want to reanimate is, you know, putting more stuff closer to the data, and that means the dreaded two words, stored procs.
Stored procs. Oh my god.
Oh my
What's
god.
yeah, I know. So I mean, if I had some processing to do, why not push it into the database, let the database do it,
Oh
right?
man.
I
Hot
know
take.
people are gonna go, oh, what are you, no guy? You like your stored procs, but there is a place and time for stored procs and functions and stuff over in the database. I mean, use the power and distribute the processing evenly across your application space. You don't have to put everything in the front end.
Yeah. For folks listening to the audio version, Chris just removed his mask and he's a DBA underneath there. So it's I'm shocked. I'm
I
shocked.
have, you know what? I've stayed at Holiday Inn Expresses, so sometimes I have been a DBA. So
No, I get what you're saying, right? Like the thing that you're seeing happening in the front end world is like they're realizing there's limits to what you should be doing on the front end. And speaking of like you know, like horrors, like when you think about it, every client that comes to your spa application is essentially running the same like process slash execution on the client. Whereas if you just did it once on the back end and cached it, it would actually be a lot more uh,
efficient.
efficient, like utilizing resources because you're not having these millions of CPUs out there essentially doing the same work repeatedly. You just do it once and cache it. So,
Yeah, like server side components. Think
mhm,
about it. If you created the output for a certain component that never changed, you wouldn't have to have every time it got loaded up, the first time it got loaded up in the browser space with the virtual DOM and all that,
mhm.
it would have to be recreated. You could basically just sit it a cached web component on the server side that could just kind of push out. And you know what? I just upgraded my internet to 2 gig.
Mhm.
So I've got 200, I get close to 2,000 megabit. Um So so that leads my question: if we're getting faster and faster connections, why do we have to do everything locally? And when now tell me if I'm wrong, but that was the big push 15 like 10 to 15 years ago when Angular and React and they all became popular. Was you have one push down to your browser, and then you don't have to have that big pipe to send stuff back and forth. And do we really need, does that really need to exist today with
Yeah.
faster and faster connections? I mean, I sometimes get 200 megabit download speeds on my iPhone, depending on where I'm at.
Go ahead, Martin.
With that connectivity, Chris, I'm just gonna run all my applications in your house.
You could, you could pay me to, I'll set the server up over there, and you can.
Chris has
It's a
got all
cloud.
the
I mean, what is a cloud? Cloud computing is just someone else's computer someplace outside of yours.
The C in cloud stands for Chris. I think that's what
Maybe.
No, but you're right in the sense of like, if we, man, you're making us this show is making me feel old, but you're right in the sense of like, if we travel back, the HTML payload was like supposedly way heavier than say a JSON payload. So what we were trying to do is optimize throughput at the time. But with things like HTTP2 and HTTP3 on the horizon, and being able to kind of like, pipeline a lot of the traffic through multiple pipes, yeah, it kind of like the old problem kind of just was solved at a lower level than the application level at this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's always good for us to go back and reevaluate why we're doing something and if it's still the right way to do it. And I think that's important, right? So, I still want to say you're wrong, just because I like telling people they're wrong. But
You can tell me I'm wrong. My wife tells me I'm wrong all the time. So, and all my kids tell me I'm wrong constantly. So,
but you're right. You're right in this instance. You're right. You're right. So,
I mean, I'm just looking for balance.
yeah.
I'm looking for balance. So,
Speaking of balance, I think we revived a couple of technologies, but we haven't really killed off too many of them.
Yeah.
What have a technology?
So, what would you kill off? What would you murder? What would you say? Go to this old camp by this spooky lake and like stay in the dark and don't run to a car and drive away.
Interesting. Good, Martin. I feel you're reaching for that axe right now. You're thinking.
Or chainsaw.
I have a couple, but I think most of them have been killed, or at least in practice they are no longer being used and very active out there. So it's good.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious one was for me is like cryptocurrency and kind of this this nonsense, right? Like, well, maybe this is a good thing to kill, but I think the hype needs to die. Whatever technology comes out and the wacky expectations and hype around new technology, as if it's a panacea, as if it's going to be this transformational thing. That's I'd never seen a technology be so transformational and live up to the hype that kind of goes around it. I think stuff can be helpful. Like LLMs are a good thing where there's like a lot of hype, and I think they can be helpful, but there's also a lot of silly, I guess there's a lot of silly prophets out there saying some weird stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know. I think that needs to I think the hype needs to die.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be the balance where something new shows up and people get enthusiastic about it, want to play with it, and I think that's a good thing, right? It's gives people a reason to try the technology, come up with wacky ideas that might just work. But I do agree that a lot of the hype after that wacky period should just die off.
Yeah. I think
one really nice example I found there was this week on Mastodon, where someone was mentioning that they pasted some JSON into an LLM and then asked the language model to convert all of that into C# codes. I mean, it's great that we can use LLMs to do that, and it's fantastic to try out all of those use cases and so on. But just imagine if you have some JSON, you could just write an algorithm that does this locally on your machine. Like you say, it could even be a stored procedure emitting C#. It can be very local, and it doesn't have to go on the network to a cloud provider running on some GPUs across 30 different servers with terabytes and terabytes of storage just to do that. It's good that people try it again, but also it's kind of silly that we are spending so much resources to make that happen.
Yeah.
I read a news article. This is where I think the hype is kind of getting a little wacky. It was a news article. I don't know if it's substantiated or not, but it said Microsoft is considering installing nuclear reactors to power their AI training, which was kind of it's kind of outlandish to think that a private company could just build a bunch of nuclear reactors.
Well, that opens up a whole other, like, I posted something on social media yesterday about back in the early 60s, there was a nuclear reactor that generated electricity from nuclear waste.
Yeah.
And so someone actually in some startup went, well, why don't we, and it hasn't been, nothing's been built since then. And they're like, we have all this waste. Why don't we actually look at doing that? But I was just talking to my son about that. We have Holland, Michigan, which is this kind of city not too far away from where I live. It's by Lake Michigan. They actually have a small, very small nuclear reactor. It's one of the new generation. I mean, it's very safe. Because it is small, it uses less material. And so that's not fun. I don't see why we couldn't. Like, it's actually a lot greener, and I probably get pitchforks coming after me again. But I think safe nuclear, the new generation of nuclear, could be greener than solar and wind and geothermal and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, I'm on the fence, but the solar energy is coming in whether we want it to or not. But putting nuclear reactors next to people's homes, especially when there's like a corporate agenda behind it, might trouble me a little bit.
I'm not saying I know all the answers, but
Well,
but
that's why people come here, Chris. They're looking for all the answers.
They're looking for the answers, the old guys. I'm trying to think what other technologies would we kill? One thing that I always thought that was kind of I like your thing about the hype.
Yeah.
Because I do think AI is going to be help us. It'll be productive, but I don't think it's going to be game changing. I think the problem is that everyone looks at in 2007 when the iPhone came out, it basically transformed. It was that transformational technology, mobile computing and stuff. And I think since then, so many people, any new thing that comes out, blockchains and crypto and AI and even to some extent the cloud.
Mhm.
Everyone thinks it's gonna. They're trying to latch on and hope, like IoT. Like I like the idea of IoT. It just never really like kind of did what the pundits said it was going to do. So yeah, I think I would kill off the hype of the overhype of every new technology that comes out, that it's going to save the world and make things a utopia for them.
Yeah. You know what I would, this is going to be really controversial. And it kind of relates to how the web worked, right? With like dependencies and pulling in scripts and stuff like that. But I was thinking about the other day, and I think centralized package repositories like npm and NuGet and what's the one for Java, Martin? It's like
Maven.
Maven. I think those are kind of a
Central.
mistake. Those I would almost say kill them off, because what's kind of happened is these critical pieces of community infrastructure are managed by organizations. And for a large part of them, they're kind of like money sinks. They're losses for a lot of these organizations. So these organizations look at it and say, well, we kind of have to maintain these centralized package like repositories, but let's not spend a lot of time and effort on kind of the experience, the curation of it, thinking about maybe the API and improving it for a lot of different types of clients. Let's just kind of do, in my opinion, the bare minimum to keep this thing alive. And I think that's okay, it works, but there's so much more that these services could be in terms of curating, being a place where people can like share ideas. And right now they're just kind of being flooded with a lot of like low value packages and dependencies. And I think about the Mastodon model of decentralization and having people really kind of manage their servers and their communities and think about that stuff. And
Mm.
like, if I could create a Frankenstein, it would be like a package management service that kind of worked off of ActivityPub, so that people could help curate and manage a lot of these ecosystems. And the control of these repositories aren't centralized into an organization that maybe doesn't put it at the highest rung of priority, right? So not to pick on NuGet, but the NuGet like main like landing page has not really changed for a decade, right? So
Yeah,
um
there hasn't been a lot of innovation
yeah.
around NuGet.
And
Martin would know more about that. Martin, I mean, what has there been any innovation around NuGet in the last 5 years?
I think it is a service where you get packages, and it's doing that really well. I do think I agree with Khalid that there's no curation, there's no real innovation in how packages are presented. If any of the big organizations, AWS or Google or Microsoft, push out a new framework version, the latest 7 pages of packages on NuGet are going to be all about that release train, and your one open source project is never going to show up there, or it's not easily discoverable. But other than that, there has been some innovation, right? There's package signing. There's a couple more mechanisms to consume your packages, knowing that you can trust whatever is on the repo there, without having to fear that someone is going to inject some random stuff into your build pipeline. Even though that can still happen, but it's definitely gotten some attention, and I think by most of the package repositories out there.
yeah. Yeah, and again, I think there have been innovations with NuGet. It's just been really kind of slow to come. So it just takes a while. Whereas like, yeah, to me, I don't know where the right place to go to find new packages, to even have conversations about them, build a community. That seems like GitHub on the project repos themselves, but there's a meta narrative that also needs to happen in our community about there's these set of 5 packages that I really like, and when you combine them, they create a solution to solve this problem or that
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Yeah.
So the centralization of all these package repositories and delivery has kind of, I think, kind of stunted a lot of communities, in my opinion. Whereas you look at something like Adeno, which is like a Node competitor. I know a bunch of security people are going to lose their minds, but you can just reference a script URL directly in your file and import that JavaScript file from anywhere, right? I think that's pretty neat. Um, does like as a .NET person, would I like something like that where you could put a Git URL and pull a package in and or maybe do that kind of stuff? That'd be kind of cool, but
Mm-hmm.
security stuff too.
Yep.
So
So, anything else we would want to reanimate or murder in this season of Halloween?
no, but I think you wanted to tell some spooky, scary stories of
Yeah, I was gonna transition over to that. So I mean, we've all been working for a fairly long time. Uh, so kind of one or two. Let's not go too long, but what spooky stories do we have that we can tell? And let's not mention companies or other people or like, hey, Bob that I used to work with did this. Like, let's not let's keep this very kind of uh not referencing specific people or places.
Yeah. Well, this one time I was working with this guy named Martin, and no, I'm just joking.
Well, I actually have a story about working with this one guy named Martin, and it is about me, so I'm going to mention the name anyway. I think a lot of people have done this at some point in their careers, where you get access to a production database or something like that, because you need to query something there, and by accident you forget this thing called the where clause and just remove everything from the database. So I actually wiped all of the subscription data for a big ISP in one of the neighboring countries here, which was not good. Fortunately, they ran point-in-time restores and backups and everything, so that was quite easy to fix. But I will tell you, that was a day where I did not need coffee to stay awake.
Yeah, I think we've all been there and deleted, dropped databases, deleted tables, and done all that. So I know here the scariest thing I ever did was uh this was 97 and we were just starting like the web and was it 97? Yeah, it was before, slightly before I got married. And I went into this large company and it was a .NET project and they were like, okay, we need help with this. I think it wasn't web, it was still like a Windows app, and it was a distributed application. So I went in, started looking at it, and I'm like, I just went to the CTO and I went, I can't work on like this is garbage. I mean, I can't fix garbage. So I went back. He goes, well, we need something. So I went back to the DBA. So we actually had an Oracle DBA, and we sat down and figured out how to like throw it all away. And that's the scariest thing is when you convince someone like a CTO or a CIO or uh, any C-level person to throw away $750,000 worth of work. and that's what it was. So this was $1997. So this wasn't today's dollars. So $750,000 was a lot of work back then. And we convinced them to throw it all away, and we got everything done in, I think we had like $400,000 in budget in 4 months. So 4 showed up a little too, like a couple times. So, but we actually got it done under budget, under time, and yeah, that was a scary thing, because it felt like the boogeyman was like behind me the whole time. So, but I always said that you can't be a good software developer if you haven't, or a software engineer, if you haven't convinced someone to throw away more than $500,000 worth of work and to redo it. So,
I mean, if you have $500,000, I would love to throw it away. I can help you there.
Yeah, I was
Oh.
gonna say I need to find someone who has that kind of money so I can convince them.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's why it was tough, but yeah, it worked out. It worked out. So,
very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so I guess we're wrapping up, right, Chris?
okay. Well, Clete, you never had a spooky story?
I do have a spooky story. So, my first job was working on kind of like point of sale systems, and I was using ASP.NET web forms, which I know Martin before this kind of said he would want to revive as well. So Martin's a big web forms lover. So
Update panel, yay.
oh, Ajax toolkit, great stuff. But so I was building this point of sale table data thing, right? And I was testing it on my local machine and pulling data from the database, and everything was working fine. But then all the managers and even the CTO of a company wanted to see a demo of it. So we pushed the app to our test lab, and it performed so badly. And I was just left scratching my head, like, what is going on? So it turned out the ASP.NET web form had about 100 megabytes of data in view state to render what essentially amounted to like 100 kilobyte like HTML table. So on my machine it worked fine because everything was local IO, but in the test lab, so the obvious fix for that was just don't store 100 megabytes in view state. But you could imagine I was like sweating bullets, like, oh, what is going on here? This is embarrassing.
Yeah, that was nightmares when you actually saw the view state that was being passed around in some of those old WebView apps. It was like, wow, I didn't know a HTTP request could be that big. So, so
Okay, so
but,
talking
okay.
about this, I'll take it back. I do not want to revive web forms.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Well, we're over a little bit time, but you know what? This was a fun episode to record. So this will come out before Halloween, I promise. Probably come out today. I'm gonna try to push it out tonight. But if you have spooky stories, if you have ideas for future shows, we're always looking. We sometimes have a hard time thinking of like ideas for shows. So like ping us individually or ping the show social media stuff. Tell us what you want us to talk about. We would love to get new ideas. And just if you're watching this on YouTube, go down there and press like and subscribe. We don't make any money off of the show, so it's not like you're putting any helping us feed our families or anything. You will get the algorithm to kind of push us out to new people and stuff. But yeah, I really appreciate doing this. Martin, Clede, thank you.
Yeah,
I
thanks,
hope
Fritz.
in 2 weeks we'll be back, and hopefully someone out there in the audience will share an idea that they want us to talk about, or they want to bring up, or even if you don't like some of the stuff that we said today, tell us. We're okay with saying we're a bunch of idiots. And I mean, I get that a lot, especially with my kids. So cool.
All right.
You guys
Thanks,
want to say
Fritz.
goodbye?
Bye.
Yeah, let's say
Bye,
goodbye.
everyone.
Bye.
Have a good Halloween.
Ooh.
Spooky. Ooh.